Hi everybody, I hope you all are doing well. Today we will be talking about my top 7 books of 2017. So I only read 23 books this year, and even though I read such a few amounts of books, it was still incredibly difficult for me to bring this pile down to 7. But beyond just objective quality and my enjoyment of the story, I realized that I read books so that they can make me think and leave a long-lasting impression on me, and that ultimately became the criteria that qualified these 7 books. I was going to do a top 10 list, but I found that would have been just a little bit too long. But if I did, my 3 runner-ups would be Love, Hate and Other Filters, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, and Anna in Between, which were all really great books. But without further ado, let's just jump into the list of my top 7. So first off, we have Purple Hibiscus by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, which was just one of the most brilliantly crafted novels that I've ever read. I did a whole video about why you should read this book, so I don't want to sound repetitive or anything, but this was a book that really struck me because it kind of took all of the things that you would learn in a sociology class and in a gender studies class and in a political science class and contextualizes it within a real-life, realistic experience. It shows how institutions have so much control over our lives as gendered beings and how we relate to each other, and I think that this is such an important and necessary book for that reason, and I definitely think that everybody should give this a go in 2018 if you haven't read it already. And also, Adichie has just solidified herself as one of my new favorite authors, so I just love this woman now. Then I have Saints and Misfits by S.K. Ali. This book is ultimately the story of a young girl's journey to find her voice after a traumatic experience. This was also the first book I read this year that is an own voices Muslim novel about a hijabi main character, and I absolutely adored that aspect of it. Objectively, it's not the best book ever, but subjectively, this book meant so much to me, and I'm so glad that something like this exists in the young adult canon now. Recently, I've noticed that it's been getting a lot more hype, so if you haven't jumped on the bandwagon as yet, now would be the perfect time. Next up, we have Homegoing by Ya Jassy. What you are about to see is a visual representation of what this book did to me. This was the outcome of my reading experience with this book, and that would be the outcome of anybody's reading experience with this book because it's just so powerful. Homegoing is an incredibly important book, and I can't stress on that enough because it provides context for modern day race relations and discrimination. I feel like when people have conversations about discrimination across the globe, there is a fundamental lack in the understanding of the history of those things, and this book sheds light on that brilliantly by covering a span of 300 years within less than 300 pages, which is such an incredibly hard thing for an author and a debut author to manage, but Jassy somehow managed to do it. I'm kind of disappointed that the hype for this died down a lot. Like, a lot of people were talking about it, especially in 2016, but now it's kind of like nobody really talks about it anymore, and I think that this is such an important and relevant book, and it provides the answers to such like superfluous conversations and debates and arguments that I see online. It's wonderful, it's necessary. If you haven't read this book as yet, please do yourself the favor of reading it. My next book is a book that I loved for so many different reasons. That is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. Now, you'll see this on a lot of people's lists this year, and for obvious reasons. It's a 1700s tropey adventure novel road trip set in Europe with a queer romance and just everything that you need in your life. This book has it. I love how this book extracts the quirk and the fun and the charm of adventure stories and young adult stories and historical fiction and blends it with this new, nuanced layer that is so necessary for these types of genres. But ultimately, I think this book, what I took away from it the most was that when you love somebody, regardless of whether it's a familial relationship or a romantic relationship, when you love somebody, you have to bring yourself to properly understand them, and to properly understand them, you have to understand yourself and how you relate to them and how you affect them, and it was wonderful. In third place, we have In the Country We Love by Diane Guerrero. I listened to this one on audio, and holy shit. This was such an impactful story, and I didn't expect for it to be the best thing ever, but it was. Guerrero's story is one that really emphasized to me that hope is one of the most important, if not the most important, survival technique when you are deprived of a proper support system as a young person. It was so emotional. This was the only book this year that actually made me cry, and yes, I know that some of these books might have made me teared up here and there, but this was the only book that actually made me sob. Like, I ugly cried. Like, I looked like Kim Kardashian after she lost her earring in the ocean.
Diamond earring came off in the ocean and it's gone. And there's people that are dying.
Definitely read this one, and I would highly recommend that you listen to the audiobook. Now we're coming down to number 2, and we were waiting for this one. You know it was going to be on the list, obviously, and that is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. What I love about this book is that it exemplifies everything that I want to see in a young adult novel, and it has all of the things that I complain about lacking in other young adult novels. This year, if you watched my videos, you would have seen that I talked a lot about the fact that these YA books that I'm reading are too short. They're focusing on one thing only, and I'm not getting enough of the characters. I'm not getting enough of the conversations and the ideas that the author is trying to explore. One way or the other, the romance is kind of taken away from the story, or something else occupies a lot of space in the story. And I know that that might be consequential of my personal taste as a reader, but Thug, in essence, is a book that stated my personal desire to see a well-explored, complex cast of characters who affect the main protagonist and her story in a way that's important. And in addition to that, the book gave itself the time for readers to properly explore the conversations and the ideas that it was trying to portray while following along with a really endearing, gripping plot. And that is what made this book so good for me. And we've made it, y'all. We're at the bottom of the list. We're here. We are at my favorite book of 2017. Let's do a drum roll. I'm too lazy to put sound effects. My favorite book of 2017 was The Lines We Cross by Randa Abdel Fattah, or When Michael Met Mina, as it's published in Australia. I will summarize this book briefly since it's my favorite book of the year, and since not a lot of people would have known about it. It is a book about a boy named Michael and a girl named Mina. It's set in Australia, and Michael is the son of very conservative, right-winged parents who start this organization called Aussie Values, which is very anti-immigrant, anti-refugee, anti-Islamic, anti-multiculturalism in its rhetoric. And then we have Mina, who came over originally to Australia as an Afghani refugee, and she is Muslim, and she is very liberal and very left in her politics and her worldview for obvious reasons. So these two characters meet, and it's about what happens from there. I would say, in essence, this is a book that is about, first of all, a boy who is learning to step out of his bubble, step out of his comfort zone, to not just find what's right for the world, but to find what's right for himself. And it's about a girl who was never afforded the privilege of comfort and has to learn and cope with the discomfort of her past and her present. And it is just a wonderful story and the best thing I read in 2017, and you need to read it. And this is probably the least popular book on this list. I know that a lot of y'all watching this video might have never heard of it, but you need to heard of it. You need to, so go read it. But yeah, that's all of my favorite books of 2017. Obviously, if you've read any of these books, I would love to know your thoughts on them in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely, lovely day, and until next time, inshallah, keep reading.